Netflix has released a second trailer for its highly anticipated Harry and Meghan two-part documentary series.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
It's about hatred. It's about race.
It's a dirty game. The pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution, this feeding frenzy.
I realized they're never going to protect you.
I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself.
The documentary is expected to give viewers rare access into the royal couple's lives and their experience within the royal family. The new trailer reveals Prince Harry's concern for the safety of his wife, and as he says, the possibility of history repeating itself, seemingly in reference to the death of his mother, Princess Diana. Part 1 of the documentary airs Thursday. Part 2 will be released on December the 15th. Richard Berthelsen joins me now. He's CTV's royal commentator. Richard, we've all pretty much seen the trailer by now, and I think a lot of people are questioning this couple that left the royal family, left Britain for privacy, is now revealing more about the family than perhaps we've ever learned. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think the question is, Marcia, did they leave for privacy or did they leave to control their media in interactions? And I think the reality is it's not so much privacy that they want, it's actually control of their images and of the narrative. And the difficulty for people that are in the public eye in the royal family who are serving a public function is you don't necessarily control your image. And that was, I think, what is at the heart of what are Meghan's concerns about the palace media operation is that it doesn't operate like celebrity culture. It doesn't operate with, cozy relationships with 3 or 4 friendlies in the press. It has to deal with the entire press, good or bad, and it sometimes has to ignore what is being said and move on. And I think she was unable to do that, and Harry was as well. And I think that's really what is at the root of a lot of the disagreement between them and the palace apparatus.
There is already a lot of backlash, and nobody, from what I understand and from what I have read, has seen the documentary in full yet. But there is criticism that Diana's image is used in the trailer, and there's talk about Kate's life, yet Kate Middleton is not in it. That Harry talks about how a woman marrying into the royal family really faces immense pressure, unbearable scrutiny. What do you think about the message and the tone really that we're hearing so far from just the trailer itself?
Well, I think the tone is consistent with the concerns that were laid out in the Oprah interview. And as we know, there's a lot of people who feel that interview wasn't really the most journalistic in the sense that Oprah didn't really probe and question and, present another side to that. And this, of course, documentary is entirely in the control of Meghan and Harry. So it is going to be their story, unfiltered, unencumbered by journalistic questions or challenges. Obviously, the trailer has been designed to be very provocative, to incite curiosity, to get people talking, to get people on the news covering it as news, to give them free publicity so that they get a great launch when it opens later this week and next week. And what really is being covered and what is really said and what is new information is a little bit hard to say. A lot of what is said here are things that we've heard before. And as you point out, the late Princess of Wales, Diana, had 2 boys, Harry and William might have a different perspective. And I think there are some people who feel it is perhaps a little in bad taste now, 25 years after her death, to continue to go back to that story and to continue to talk about it. When really, let's be honest, the entire framework for media involvement has changed dramatically. Some of it for the worse. But some of it's also for the better because the British press now have a code of conduct that they did not have during Diana's time.
Well, speaking of bad timing, that is also not sitting well with many who are saying, let's remind ourselves that this documentary was set to air at this time, and this, of course, was scheduled before the Queen died in September.
Yeah, and there's every indication now from more and more reports that are coming out how distressed the Queen really was over what happened with Meghan and Harry's interview and their departure from the royal family in the last few years of her life. And of course, as we know now, those days were numbered far more than we realized. So it does seem, again, in a bit of poor taste on that front. The royal family's work continues. They've taken pains to kind of continue business as usual. And I think it's quite revealing that today it was announced that on the release of the second part of this series on December 15th, the entire royal family will be together at a Christmas Carol concert, which has a charitable purpose and a focus on those who are most in need in the United Kingdom. So there's going to be a very strong contrast between two people who are on television, albeit on a streaming service, talking about themselves and their truth, while the royal family is continuing the work in a very, very direct way on the 15th of December.
Final question for you this morning, Richard. If King Charles is upset by what is revealed in this docuseries, could he strip them of their titles? Could he strip his son of his title?
He could. He could change the letters patent and exclude them. I think it's unlikely, as it's only likely to cause greater issue. Harry was born a prince. He is Prince Harry. Insofar as the Dukedom of Sussex, it's really only Parliament that actually can take that away. There is a bill before the UK Parliament to provide some opportunities for that. That may also be considered in the case of Andrew as well. So they're complex legal issues, probably best not to got into, but what it is going to really do is impact the relationship between Harry and Meghan and the rest of the family, which can only be described as rocky as it was. And I think going into this new reign, I think this will not be welcomed in any way, shape, or form by certainly the King and Queen, as well as the Prince and Princess of Wales, that is, William and Catherine.
Oh, dear. All right. Richard Berthelsen, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We'll talk to you again.